The number one principle of dealing with hordes is to stop this little StarCraft-style concave effect, because once an enemy starts walking past, we'll say around here, once they start getting like here-ish, it's over. You will start taking damage. The number one thing that you always need to understand is you need to be on the outside of the horde. If you're fighting right here in a hallway and you hear a horde and you look behind you and you see like, oh, they're spawning behind us, you have to deal with that immediately. You always want to get out from the horde. You do not want to fight into it. You do not want to fight sandwiched. You always want to be on the outside. The moment you recognize that it is a proper horde, because there's two forms of horde. There's an ambush and a horde. If it is an ambush, your character will always mention it. And it will only ever be one wave of enemies. It is very important that you understand this. You can fight into an ambush, and you will win every single time. You cannot realistically fight into a horde most of the time. Because once specials and elites and God forbid a boss start getting mixed in, if those are spawning in one direction, and the horde spawning in another direction, unless you're playing with some very good players, you're just going to die right there. So, let me show you what I'm talking about. Let me go up to this very large horde right here. So, this is where you just stop everything you're doing, get to the outside. See, a lot of people, when they were fighting there, when I was about to get cornered, they would have kept fighting there. It's also important that you constantly keep dodging. And as soon as things start getting to your left and your right, you start to push attack. And you see how I'm using space to constantly maneuver around the horde? Because if you just backtrack or just go forward, then the horde will start to form around you. And you're going to get clipped by things out of your FOV. So if you have to go back in a left and right motion. This will stop them from building up around you. So you see how I just dealt with all of that? That was much more than a singular spawn of a horde. That was like 2 horde spawns stacked up. And I could deal with that without taking damage. As long as you have space to fight, you will be fine. But what happens if you don't have space to fight? So let me spawn some more guys. Let me spawn 50 guys, and let me fight with my back to the wall to show you what it's like when you don't have space, because that's really the problem. Most people can handle most situations in Tide games when they have space to maneuver. The thing that people really struggle with is the idea of making space for themselves. Sometimes you have to just make space with nothing. So if you're fighting here and you know that a horde is coming like this, just go into a defensive stance, do something like this, and then give yourself cover. I know that this grenade is going to eliminate most of the horde, and I know it's going to stun them. Okay, so what happens if you don't have space, and you don't have a grenade, and you don't have an ultimate? Okay, first off, if you're in this situation in the first place, you have made massive, massive mistakes. I'm just going to tell you that right now. Go away. You guys need to not instantly aggro to me. So that's the first thing to realize. Don't ever put yourself in a situation where you have no space, no resources, and no nothing. At the very least, if you're going to walk into a dangerous situation where a horde is likely to spawn, because hordes spawn on triggers. They sometimes spawn randomly, but most of the time they spawn because you walked into their trigger that caused them to spawn. So, this is where your defenses and your pushing comes into real big effect. So as soon as I take that one hit to toughness, I now know that I'm liable to take toughness bleed through. But you see how I'm fighting on the wall here? I'm just using the iframes from the dodge and the stagger from the push to keep the horde stable. And look, that was 50 enemies. I stayed within a 3-meter range with my back to the wall, and I took 0 damage. It is very important that you get used to fighting with about 1 dodge worth of space, because you can dodge to use iframes to not get hit by their attacks while pushing them, which will stagger them, and what'll happen is the guys standing here, they will get pushed back into the guys behind them, staggering them, whereas you will get an extra second or two to breathe and do things. Also, This is why it is critically important that your curios have some kind of stamina management on them. See, I always use a +3. I always, on every build on every class, use a +3 max stamina curio, and I always use stamina regeneration. I also always use block and sprint efficiency. And you saw that be very effective right there. When I have this much stamina, I can mix in as many push attacks as I want while blocking as many hits as I need to. Let me just show you why this is so important. I'm going to spawn 25 guys, and I'm only going to block them. You're going to see just how effective it actually is to just block the horde. See? And then look, if I start mixing in dodges to give my stamina a chance to come back, and pushes, you can manage the horde. I can manage the horde forever like this. This is giving myself 0 offense. And yeah, it's not the cleanest, but when are you ever deliberately not attacking a horde? That should cover just about everything, I think.